everyone, and welcome to another year of cycling with World Cycling Productions. I'm Phil Liggett, alongside me Paul Sherwen, and this is the 100th edition of the Great Single Day Classic from Milan down to San Remo. It starts the classic season. It's also, Paul, the longest classic.
It certainly is, over 285 kilometres, but it's all about the capos down towards the end once we start to head into the outskirts of San Remo. Great to see Lance Armstrong back here. A great comeback for this man who's been away for the sport for 3.5 years.
Well, this is a big challenge for Lance today as he shakes hands there with the killer, Danilo De Luca. And the rider's now moving off towards the start itself. A big challenge, yes, for Lance, but we've seen him race in the Tour Down Under. We've seen him ride very strongly in the Tour of California. I don't think he'd be too afraid today.
No, certainly not. This is the kind of race, if you've got the experience, you can actually sit in the wheels for an awful long time. And if a man has got experience in the main field this afternoon, it certainly is Lance Armstrong, the winner of the Tour de France on 7 occasions. This is where the riders are going from, leaving from the Piazza di Castiglio in Milano, over the Turchino, down onto the Côte d'Azur and the Mediterranean, then along into the outskirts of San Remo.
Yes, and if they kept going, they'd arrive in Monaco and they could take a look at the start of the Tour de France this July, which is where the race will begin. Well, as the riders make their way, we're going to catch up with the action now, and I can tell you the first 2 hours of racing today, they didn't waste any time at all. They covered 48 kilometres in each hour, so over 90 kilometres covered in 2 hours of racing. Well, you've ridden Milan-San Remo, Paul, and that's pretty average for the course, isn't it? They always start quickly here.
Certainly does. Team management puts out the orders very early in the day. Go for the early morning breakaway. See if we can get represented there and see how the race unfolds a little bit later on. And what happens normally then is the teams of the sprinters come to the front and slowly but surely they pick away the men who manage to get into that early morning breakaway.
Well, they got away with the official start just before 10 o'clock this morning. And as you can see, the weather is one that will bring out the enthusiasm in the field, I think, because it's the sort of day today when the riders will want to perform well. And I guess that man there, Ivan Basso, will want to show us now he's on the comeback trail, like so many riders now coming back from drug scandals and now full of enthusiasm again.
Alassio, that's the town the riders are coming into right now, and a very famous race used to take place from Nice to Alassio, and it used to zigzag up and down the mountains along this part of the Mediterranean. You can see the main field starting to get themselves organised at the front end. It's because we're starting, Phil, to get down to the early capos, and that's the important thing. The riders left Milano, as we said. They went over the Col de Torcino, and this is what they're looking for. They're trying to pull themselves back to this leading breakaway, which I think now we're down to just around about 7 survivors.
Yeah, 7 or 8 men there. The whole breakaway getting clear very early on included Gianpaolo Sulla of Barlow World, Michael Ignatieff of Katusha. They thinned down a little bit now. Christophe Lemavella was also here, and so too, that's Sebastian Turgot there from the B-Box Boy Telecom. This young man didn't sign in this morning, by the way. He's probably going to ride in about 23 years' time.
And that's Schuler on the front for Team Barlow World, a team who will be looking to perform well in these early season races to try and get themselves selection as a wild card a little bit later on in the year for races like the Giro d'Italia, and of course they'll be hoping to go back to the Tour de France.
Well, Barlow World are out of the sport at the end of this year. They were initially out of the sport at the Tour de France last year when they had the doping scandal, but happily decided to stay in for the riders' benefit, but they will go at the end of this season. So most of the riders on Barlow World will be looking for new teams during this year. The ISD rider up front is Belkov, Maxim Belkov here, and the Saxo rider Kasper Klostergaard on Bjorn Ries's new team this year, which was CSC and is now Saxo Bank. That's Turgot of Boyd Telecom. Still working pretty well together. They split up on the first of the capos and thinned out the group. There were 11 riders. They've got down to this group of, I think, 7 now.
Yes, this is the Testa della Corsa, the front end of the bike race, and everybody knows just exactly what is happening behind because the main field is starting to get the pace whipped up a fraction by the teams of the sprinters, the men who really believe that they've got a chance of winning Milan-San Remo. Now, to win Milan-San Remo as a sprinter, you've got to place yourself at the front end of the main pack once you come to the Capo Berta, then, of course, the Cipressa, and, of course, the final big assault of the day, the one that everybody talks about, and that's the climb of the Poggio.
Not too surprising to see the Quick-Step boys on the front now as they try to get this cleaned up before we get to the steeper climbs towards the finish, because Tom Bonan is riding today. So too is his new lead-out partner in Alan Davies, the Aussie, who's sprinting quite well. I reckon he'll be the man to try and take Tom to the line today. and Quick Step have now been told to get rid of this breakaway up front. The gap is coming down quite quickly.
You can see there that it's a very nervous race, Milan-San Remo. I know a lot of riders always talk about how many times you use your brakes in a bike race like this, and the mechanics will tell you after Milan-San Remo they may as well throw away all of the brake blocks, because you can use up a complete set of brake blocks in just one day at Milan-San Remo. There's Lance Armstrong, Phil, with the black show covers there, riding at the front end of the main field. It's almost just like turning the clock back.
Yes, it is, isn't it? But what a lovely scene that is off to the left here. The riders not interested in the scenery as they race down towards San Remo, rather, and down towards the Côte d'Azur of France. If they kept going, they're just more anxious now to get down to that finish in the centre of San Remo, over the top of the Poggio. It's a surprising climb. It depends how fast they climb it. There is Lance Armstrong. He looks pretty confident, and I wonder what he thinks about at this stage of the race, thinking, I'm back in the action. I don't believe 6 months ago it was even in his mind to make a comeback, and here he is at this level again.
Well, I think what was more important, Phil, is what you said just a little earlier. We saw him race in the Tour Down Under in Australia, and he was very aggressive, and he was already in fine form. And of course, he wasn't too bad either when we saw him get to the start line of the Amgen Tour of California. This is the route that the riders took a little earlier on. There is the Passo del Tercino, and that is where the first aggression comes down through Savona. And then what's most important for the riders is once they've gone through the feeding station there, the Capo start, Capo Berta, through Imperia, the Cipressa, the Poggio, and then the finish line after 298 kilometres.
It was the first climb when they hit the side of the waters there at Capo Main, where the breakaway did split up, and 7 of them getting rid of 4. And I think they sensed then that there already was quite a reaction coming from the main field. Team Milram there being led by Gerald Cholik now, who was a Team Columbia high road rider, and he's a good finisher, so they're also been seeing near the front of the race. So too is Christian Knies on the same team, working pretty hard. Liguelia at the arrowhead is forming on what are quite narrow roads here. Very picturesque, good road surface, but plenty of twists and turns as well.
I noticed Armstrong riding at the front there, surrounded by his teammates, keeping himself at the front end of the main field. It's a very dangerous race, Milan-San Remo. A lot of riders have ruined their season because of a crash in this race in the early part of the year. And I think that's why Lance Armstrong is seeing the better part of valour. There he is again, number 21, right at the front end of the main field, making sure that if there are any accidents, Phil, they're going to certainly happen behind him.
As we look down on Lance, and I can hardly believe we're actually commentating on this man again. I thought we'd seen the end of him after his 7 Tours de France, but I must say I'm one of the guys who welcomes him back. He's brought a lot of interest, particularly to the race down in Australia, the Tour Down Under, where the Premier there, Mike Ram, reckoned that he doubled the television viewership, he trebled the visitors to the state for the Tour Down Under, and also with the same applies to the Tour of California. Massive turnout there as well. He's still a magnet of the world of cycling. And I think largely the riders themselves, Paul, are happy to see him back.
No, they certainly are. I think it's raised the level of awareness in the sport of professional cycling. There he is, just sitting at the front end of the main field. In front of him there in the white jersey, Pippo Pozzato, a former winner of this bike race when he raced for Team Quickstep. And he managed to slip away on the running towards the finish line, and Tom Bonham finished 4th on that occasion, but was very happy to see that the victory was within that squad.
Yes, Pozzato winning Milan-San Remo back in 2006. Since then, he's shown his worth as well. He's had a runner-up in the event as well, so he's a man for the distance. It's an enormous distance to come straight out of just training races for many of these guys. They weren't over in California, Tour of Qatar, or indeed the Tour Down Under, so their season beginning with a very long race indeed. It's a daunting task to face up to almost 300 kilometres, nearly 180 miles. And they're going to feel the way as best they can. 50 kilometres to go, but unfortunately it's the hardest part of the course.
The most testing part of the course. I just caught a quick glimpse there of Fabian Wegmann, the German national champion, sitting at the front end of the main field, now a member of Team Milram. And Milram very present at the front end of the peloton, Phil. You can see them in the new blue and white strip, and they obviously are trying to make sure that they can keep their men to the front end of the pack. Columbia High Road there as well. They'll be looking after their young man from the Isle of Man. I think that was him I just saw slipping back down the main field, Mark Cavendish.
Yes, he might find the hills a little bit of trouble towards the end. He's still only just under 22 years of age. and showed us last year he's going to be the brightest sprinter on the block for sure, and certainly the best sprinter that the United Kingdom has ever produced. He comes from the Isle of Man, as these riders now start to just concentrate on bringing this small breakaway back. I don't think he's got a chance of staying away, in all honesty, today. It was a long break, it's gone well, but they've split up a little bit too early. Gap is down to 2:38, and I think the breakaway here, rather the group at the back, are going to feel they've got this breakaway a little bit under control. There, by the way, is Martin Zhanglili. He's joined Rabobank now from Skill Shimano, and I think he'll really be giving his head this year.
No, I think the main field, Phil, they realise that 2.5 minutes is not really very much for them to worry about, because once they get to the serious repetition of the capos, you'll see this leading group of riders have chunks of 30 and 45 seconds lopped off their advantage on the slopes of just one single climb. Back at the front, Gianpaolo Ciulla, a very good sprinter. It came down to a sprint for this group. And Yuri Christoph is the rider in there for AG2R, who's got the number 13 that he's wearing upside down, and that is something a lot of riders tend to do these days, Phil, because they still don't like the superstition of having to carry that number.
Yes, I think it's a trend that seems to have been started. I think it was started by Fabian Cancellara. Now they've all caught on to the idea. This is Gianpaolo Ciulla. The Italians on the Barlow World Team. I had the privilege of meeting most of them in South Africa the early part of the year, where they've based for the training camp. Although it's officially registered in Great Britain, the Barlow World Team, it is a South African setup, and it's managed by the Italians, so it's international.
It certainly is. They've got great riders in their midst. Obviously, Robbie Hunter is the most experienced rider on Team Barlow World, but I'm looking to see I would say the growing up, the maturing this year of Chris Froome, who rode the Tour de France last year for the first time. Although he now races on a licence from the United Kingdom, I very much regard him still as a Kenyan rider because he grew up in Nairobi.
Yes, and the Africans certainly regard him as one of their own, that's for sure. Well, the pacemaking being set up here as they continue. The Française de Jure rider Christophe Lemervel added to the list. The ISD man is Belkoff, and then comes Klostergaard from Saxo Bank. So they're all still putting the weight into this breakaway. Sébastien Turgot is the boy from France in the B-Box Boy Telecom team. Slightly different team name, same colours this year. And then comes Martin Zhanglili of Rabobank. He rode for Silent Slaughter last year, didn't get a win. Before that he was with Skill Shimano. Hasn't had a win, in fact, for a couple of years, but he does keep trying, and if he keeps trying, it might come up trumps one day.
Well, he got some great wins when he rode for that Skill Shimano squad, but I think if you start to look at the riders' body language here, you can see the fatigue is starting to creep in. It's a very long race for the start of the season, this. You know, this is the longest race of the whole year, and it comes right in the very month of March, almost 300 kilometres. And to put that into old money, that's 180 miles of racing, or almost 7 hours in the saddle when they get to the end.
Yes, it's quite an indoctrination into the world of cycling for a new season. And don't forget, here on World Cycling Productions we have a lot of big events coming this year. The Giro d'Italia itself, not the 100th edition of the Giro, but the 100th year of the event. We'll be doing a special edition of the videos on that for you. And of course the Tour de France. Lance Armstrong is said to be riding the lot, and it'll be interesting to see just how he goes.
I have to say, I think there may well have just been a crash there, Phil, because there seem to be a lot of riders missing from the back end in that main field, and that's very often how this race, Milan-San Remo, splits up on the repetition of the capos. It's actually very often with the crashes at the back end of the main field. It's such a dangerous, nervous race, and riders are always prepared to take risks to try and keep themselves at the front end of the main field, to start the capos, to start the Cipressa in the first 15 or 20 places. The Testa della Corsa is 2 minutes and 30 seconds now ahead of the Gruppo. It is really starting to come down.
Yeah, they've lost another 8 seconds here. And as you can see, the speed over the ground by the peloton there is very, very quick indeed. And so they're now beginning to get to these little escalades, which will, I think they'll hit them as fast as they can. The strong men will try to get to the front, hold position, and split this race up if they can. It's not normally won in a breakaway, Milan-San Remo. Very often the peloton gets itself reduced to about 40-50 riders, but then they'll try and get their sprinters to the front if they can hang on over the undulations.
Well, this is the town of Imperia. All these riders now know that looming on the horizon is the start of the serious climbs. That's why there's quite possibly just a little bit of a slowing at the front end of the main field.
Liquigas here. They've got not just Basso in here, they've also got Vincenzo Nibali, another man that's now developing nicely, just a little bit older than Cavendish, but he has a lot more all-round ability than Mark Cavendish, I think.
Yes, definitely. I think a lot of these riders, Phil, starting to get that nervousness as they know now the critical, most strategic parts of Milan-San Remo are on the horizon. This is where the race is going to be won and lost.
Well, just looking down from the helicopter, which is tracking down the side here, the riders themselves are just happy enough to saunter along here. They've got the great breakaway down to 2:30. The names up there aren't of the quality who are going to hold off this field, let's face it. And it looks to me as though Quickstep and Team Milram are supplying the firepower just at the moment, with a little bit of help from Liquigas, because they also could possibly take this one out at the end.
Yes, but watch out for Pipo Pozzato. Team Katusha, which is the new team on the block from Russia, have had an awful lot of success in the smaller minor races so far this year, but they will be looking to make their name in the big races like Milan or San Remo. The main field now is starting to stretch out. That's an indication the pressure is coming on at the front end of the peloton, and it's still the pale blue and white jerseys of Team Milram who are very happy to set the pacemaking.
Yeah, slightly new jerseys designed. It looks a little bit like a cow, except it's in blue and white instead of black and white, which isn't surprising because they're advertising the milk industry. But on the same token, you've noticed the new colours too for Team Columbia, who brought them into show at the start of the season. Look a little bit like an underfed skeleton, to be quite honest, but they're catching on a little bit now. I must confess, I didn't like them at first, Paul, but I think I do now.
I think they're very visible once you see a main field charging down the road, and I think that's the important thing about choosing a jersey, making sure that it's visible not only to the riders in the team but also to television as well. I think that's probably one of the reasons why they've designed that new strip during the winter months. The main field, there's still a lot of riders left in that main field, almost 200 riders at the start of Milan-San Remo. In the old days, when there were unlimited fields, they used to have a starting number of almost 300 riders. And that's a rider for every kilometre of the race. Well, that was in the old days. Now it's down to the top end of the sport with just inside of 200. Testa della Corsa, those are the 7 survivors of the early morning breakaway. That's Turgo there, just in the Bouygues Telecom in 3rd position. Christophe is up there as well, and he's the rider who just swung off the front for Team AG2R.
And this is Sebastian Lang of Silence Lotto bringing them through now. There are in fact 8 riders in that breakaway as we head towards the Capocervo Mimosa. Mimosa is the flower which comes out around March time, a beautiful yellow bush. And when you ride Paris-Nice, Paul, I think that's what everybody wants to see. You usually get to it about 2 days out from the finish, don't you?
Yep, that's once you start to climb the Col de Tanneron. That's one of the final climbs. The riders normally go over there on the Saturday before dropping into Cannes, and then they know they've reached the Côte d'Azur. They've almost got to the end of Paris-Nice. Just looking up there, you can see the big bell towers. These riders now know that starting to loom on the horizon is the Cipressa. That's a climb which was put into the Milan-San Remo around about 15-20 years ago to try and split up the race and defavorise the sprinters. But over the years, Phil, I have to say the sprinters have learned how to get themselves over that climb.
You just close your eyes and suffer, I guess, because they absolutely fly up these hills. They keep turning off the coast road, climbing the hills, descending back onto the coast road, then take the next one in turn. 2:18, well, they're not exactly running at them right now, are they? Because they've only got back 20 seconds in the last few kilometres, so they're waiting here. They know if they close the gap before they get to the steep climbs, then the chances are there will be counter-attacks. And I think any rider with ambition today will try to go on the last 2 climbs of the day.
But if you look at the long length of that main field, that's a big indication, Phil, that the pressure is pretty much on at the front end of the main field. I think it's just a question of how long is it going to be before the elastic snaps and they really start to axe into that advantage of that 7-man leading group. There is a big, I think, organisation starting to come at the front end of the main field, and you look at the faces of these riders in the breakaway, I think they're pretty much resigned. You know, they are all true professionals at the top end of the sport, and they know just exactly how fast the main peloton can go on the run in towards the finish, especially when the sprinters in this race can start to smell the victory in this big one-day classic, La Primavera as it's called in Italian.
Spring Classic, and what a lovely way to start the year too. Here comes our unlucky number 13, Krivtsov of AG2R. The one man who might have got a result here today, but he's no longer with the break, is Team Columbia High Road's Bernard Eisel. He was in this breakaway, but he got split off on the Capo Main, which brought them onto the coast, and was one of the 4 riders who were dropped here. And the peloton will have picked him up by now, I would think. There's a lot of change of pattern here. Now, this is where they're planning something, because more movement on both sides of the road. This is what we've got to go and what we've done already. As we've been over the Torquino Pass, we're now heading to the little ripples towards the end. The Cipressa will lead us to the Poggio, and on one of those the winner could slip away with a bit of luck.
Well, it's a magnificent day for a bike race, I would have to say. There you can see the main field. It's still that long line of organisation at the front. That's the boys from Milram. But there is, as you said, Phil, an awful lot of organisation on the left and the right-hand side as teams, you can see the same colours starting to get together. They realise they want to get into those climbs. The Cipressa especially more than anything else, I think, in the first 5 to 10 places, because that is a beast of a climb, and it's a battle for the right-hand bend off this road. And that comes up just after the town of Imperia.
Yes, and on the right-hand side of the road there was an awful lot of the lime green colours of Liquigas, which are led by Basso on his comeback trail. He did ride in Japan just before the end of last season and got a podium position, but this now he'll see as his big comeback here. They've also got the sprinter there in Daniela Benatti and Murilo Fischer, who's the only Brazilian rider here, by the way, in the race. And he's also on Liquigas along with Vincenzo Nibali. It is in fact a very strong team, and of course you never trust an Italian racing in Italy. They all have to be watched.
Well, Henrik Hausel there in the black jersey of Team Cervelo, alongside him Jeremy Hunt, the former British national champion. Nice to see Jeremy Hunt was still surviving on a top level team in the sport. Testa della Corsa now, Phil, it's down to around the 2-minute mark, and you can see different teams now starting to move to the front end to get that little bit of organisation going. The red jerseys on the left hand side, that's Aqua Saponi, and they are getting themselves a serious bit of organisation now. The Liquigas riders over on the right hand side, I think they will be thinking about Daniele Benatti. Team Columbia High Road just up to the front there as well in that new yellow and white strip, keeping themselves organised. It looks like Mark Cavendish riding in about 10th or 11th place. And now if he wants to get over the climbs today, Phil, will have to start these climbs in the first 5 to 10 places. He'll adopt the old sprinter's attitude of starting at the front end of the main field on the climbs, slipping to the back of the group and hoping that he survives over the top of the climb to stay in contact.
Well, look at these guys' faces up in the front. There's nobody giving much away here. They're getting on with the job in hand. They're not concerned about the race behind. They're doing what they can do, working well together. I think these little hills towards the end can't come quick enough for these guys. They need a little bit now to see if they can open up the gap just before they drop down to the finish. It doesn't look likely. I should imagine the next time check will be inside 2 minutes. The big teams are now throwing some firepower in the front. That's the thing. If you've got a sprinter on your team you think can win, then you better send some men up the front to do some pace making as well. Otherwise you'll earn the wrath of the other big teams.
Well, the thing is as well, when you've got a sprinter on the squad, what you tend to think about is the Cipressa, for example, is probably the end of your bike race in Milan-San Remo, because you can concentrate on giving all of your energy to get your sprinter to an ideal position for the start of the Cipressa, and then it's just a question of surviving and getting yourself to the finish line in San Remo as best as possible.
Janigui drops off the picture there. ISD rider there is Belkov. Schuler. I don't think there's 8 riders here at the moment. I'm just wondering if we've lost one, because we've still got the Boy Telecom rider there, Turgo. There's the sharp end of the peloton now, and there's still a few more scurrying up the outside, try and claim a nice place and sit near the front. Not seen too much of Lance in these last few kilometres. Maybe the distance now beginning to get to those legs, although he's probably still in the field down there. There's the new colours of Team Columbia, the yellow and white. They'll be trying to move Mark Cavendish into a better position right now. And there's a man who doesn't really care where Milan-San Remo is. He's enjoying a day out on the ocean. Breakaway group, all still working together. Sat at the back for the moment is Sebastian Lang.
Well, I tell you one thing, Sebastian Lang is a rider who was brought into this Silence Lotto squad, Phil, not really for Milan or San Remo, but he was brought into this squad to try and strengthen the team for Cadel Evans in the month of July, because Cadel Evans has always complained about the lack of strength in the team when it comes to the big month of July and his quest to try and be the first Australian to win the Tour de France. On 2 occasions now he's come up in the runner-up position, and that's the next big climb of the day, the Capo Berta. And you can always tell when you've just about survived in the group of the Capo Berta, because at around about 500 meters to the summit, over on the right-hand side, there's a couple of sisal plants which I remember quite explicitly, and I knew that if I got to the sisal plants, I'd go over the top of the Capo Berta in the main field.
All right, well, I'm sure Mark Cavendish and the like will be thinking the same thing here. But just thinking what you're saying there, I'm not so sure where Silence Lotto are going, really, because Evans has been left in the team isolated again, really, because Popovic came and went and wasn't very much use to them anyway last year. But Chris Horner has been allowed to go, and I think that's a big mistake. He's gone back to ride alongside Lance Armstrong in Astana, and Chris is such a good bike rider. I think he should have stayed with Silence Lotto as far as Cadell is concerned.
Yeah, well, I think Lance Armstrong, Johan Brunel and the rest saw the strength and the power of Chris Horner, and as soon as they knew there was a little bit of a debate about his contractual agreement with Silence Lotto, they leapt on that as a great opportunity.
Yeah.
I think we'll see a lot of Chris Horner later in the season.
Now the split, the pursuers on the right at the moment. The men who are setting the pace here is Gianpaolo Schuler, and just behind him is Yuri Krivtsov of AG2R. They've still got quite a head of steam there and still pushing some heavy gears here as the road starts to head on to the Capo Berta. Schuler won't be worried about this, he can climb quite well. When we talk about good designs of jerseys, I think Baller World have one of the best designs in the peloton. It's so easy to pick out. Here's the action now, and pace getting up. That looks like Lance Armstrong near the front.
I was just going to say, as you'd said a moment ago, I haven't seen much of Lance Armstrong. You can spot him very easily. He's got a different coloured helmet to the rest of the team there with the yellow Livestrong logos on it, and he's very happily wearing his dark black overshoes. There he is, number 21, Lance Armstrong, Team Astana. Now, that is an incredible comeback story. 3.5 years away from the top end of the sport, and the way he's riding his bike now as if it was only yesterday. But I tell you one thing, for a man who claims that he spent the last 3.5 years sitting around in bars and drinking beer, Phil, I think anybody who's got inside of 3 hours on 3 separate occasions in marathons has not let himself go to waste.
No, I don't think so at all. He's really looked after his body. He is not just a comeback man deciding to have another go. He has never lost his fitness and his edge, nor his thirst for competition either. I've ridden with him a few times on these charity rides, and believe me, they're hard. Anyway, it's not the only thing that's hard right now, because it looks as though we've got a spot of bother here for the ISD boy, Belkov, as he starts to unhitch on the Capo Berta, and it's the pacemaking of Schuler which is doing it. The others look reasonably okay, and that's an attack by Turgo. Turgo's gone for Bouygues Telecom.
Well, having looked at the body language of this man for the last 20 or 30 kilometres, I'd never expected the attack to come from him. But he obviously felt this was a great opportunity. You can see there it's Klostergaard who's setting the tempo just behind there to try and make sure that they can pull the Frenchman back into the fold. But the reaction there has come from Schuler. He is, as you said, Phil, probably the best climber in this group.
Well, this is an interesting move. The French on the top in Italy at the start of the season. Perhaps it's going to be the start of a good year for the French riders. That's how he did it. A perfect position for attack. Midway down the breakaway, never even looked at them. Accelerated and went. No reaction. Klostergaard was the man on the front, didn't react. But it looks as though they've got him back, because this is Schuler right up behind him.
Well, they've clawed their way back. The main field not under too much pressure now. They know that once they've gone over the Capo Berta, they drop down into the town of Imperia, through the town of Imperia, very rapidly around the fountain in the middle, and then it's the right-hand turn, and that's where the big climb of the Depressa and the next serious sort-out happens. Coda del Gruppo, the back end of the bike race.
Well, Turgo only turned professional at the start of last year, so he's only into his second full season. He won one race right out at the beginning, only a small race. It was in the Ivory Coast in Africa, so we probably don't count that one. But anyway, he's feeling his legs now. They always say you need 2 years to settle in at the top, don't they?
I just noticed in around about 15th position there, the Liquigas rider Ivan Basso, one of the other comeback persons this year. Also looking fairly comfortable there, Phil, at the front end of the main field on the Capo Berta. I'm just looking to see if I can see the sisal plants over on the right-hand side, and that's what a lot of riders will be looking for, because that's a very well-known road mark for a lot of them.
With fondness and pain, I'm sure the memories will come flooding back. But just seeing Jeremy Hunt also riding well for Cervelo. That's another new team this year, of course, Cervelo test team. They've pinched Carlos Sastre and put him on it, so that'll be an interesting situation as we go towards the Giro d'Italia and the Tour de France. But Jeremy Hunt, he's always been on the teens but never got the final nod to ride in the Tour de France. So maybe this year he will finally line up in La Grande Boucle.
That's Mike Friedman at the back there for Garmin Slipstream, and that's certainly not the place that you want to be as we start to pick up the pacemaking. And you can see a lot of riders as well at the back there, Phil, from Team Columbia High Road. There's Armstrong. Always got a teammate alongside him there riding, and look at the way he's pedaling. That pedaling action is the pedaling action that is very reminiscent of 3.5 years ago, and it's his old teammate there, Jaroslav Popovic, who's pacing him up to the front end of the main field. Stefano Garzelli.
Yeah, and I think he's the best bet, and wouldn't surprise me if Stefano Garzelli is not waiting now for a springboard attack, because I noticed the red jersey of Aqua Saponi have been steadily moving forward for about 20k now. Now they've got him onto the front here, and that for me indicates an attack. I don't think he'd fancy his chances in a sprint finish. He'll want to go alone. So there's a few riders now planning an attack here as we head towards the last couple of climbs of the day.
Well, we're now pretty much comfortably over the top of Capoberta. This is the plunge into the town of Imperia. Now watch out if you ride through this town, because right in the middle of the town square there in fact is a nasty little fountain which is very pretty, but unfortunately normally with the winds that blow in this part of the world it spreads a little bit of water onto the cobblestones, and I've seen a nasty crash or two over the years just at that point.
Well, no word of any nasty crashes so far today. We have had some though on the descent, especially as moments become desperate moments on the way off these cappers. But at the moment, all is well. I suppose it's Capi in Italian, isn't it, really?
Si, tout à fait.
Yeah.
There's the fountain I was talking about, right in the middle of the town square. A very beautiful town square here. Everybody nice and safely around it. In fact, I think for today it looks very much as if they may well have turned it off.
Conservation, a wonderful thing as the riders go through the centre. 3, 6, 7 riders here, working well. I've not seen a single passenger in this breakaway. They have really done pretty well to hold off the break. There's Schuler again. He's been doing a lot of work here, the Italian, on the Barlow World squad. This is Jalinghi. He's coming through now. And Belkov just behind. So they're all still putting their pound of flesh into the race here. And they've still got around about 2 minutes. We haven't had a time check for quite a while now, but they're working well.
I think next time we get a time check, Phil, we'll be looking at around about the 1.5 minute mark, because certainly they're starting to get themselves a little bit nervous at the back end of the main field. They know what they have to do. That's the front end of the peloton, and they are now, you can see, in the outskirts of Imperia as well. And in fact it is now on the front end of the main field a different coloured jersey. It is the red jerseys of Aqua Saponi.
35 kilometres to go, almost 36. A little bit early for a breakaway yet. They're more content with bringing down the race and getting it all back together again. But there's no doubt now that Aqua Saponi are trying to launch Stefano Garzelli into the thick of the action. I've noticed too, Case Depart are now moving a few riders up front. They've not got their big man Valverde here. They do have their other strong man in Joaquin Rodriguez in the squad. Sort of man that could go away towards the end. They've also got Oscar Pereiro, the winner of the Tour de France in 2006. I have to say that it's hard to imagine that after the disqualification of Floyd Landis, and we don't really see him as a Tour winner, and I don't think in all honesty Oscar counts himself as a Tour winner either.
Aqua Saponi very much in control now. This is Imperia, a very famous town that most of these bike riders know. This is where the real start of the aggression of Milano-San Remo is, as they make their way out of town now, out onto the open road again. Starting to loom, Phil, very much on the horizon is the Cipressa, and that's where it's extremely important to ride well.
Little image of Klostergaard there, looks over, sees Turgot come through. And the FDJ rider is Christophe Lemavelle, and he's a strong boy. He's been in the Tour de France, he's got a bit of experience behind him, and he's got himself into what was certainly the early morning breakaway, but they are the survivors of it today as they come down to the closing kilometres. The last 20 miles is when it all happens, the last 32 kilometres. The back of the bunch there getting a little bit ragged, but not too bad. It's quite a big peloton, in fact.
It certainly is still a lot of riders in with a chance, and who will probably feel they're still in with a chance of winning Milano-San Remo. There's Danilo the Killer De Luca, and he's a man to keep a very close eye on, Phil, on these last capos, because he's got the acceleration to get away on the Cipressa, or of course with a late attack on the Poggio. Alongside him was David Rebellin.
Oh, the killer's in a dangerous position right now, and he hasn't really had a great run of luck at Milan-San Remos in the past. He's a very good early Spring Classics rider. He likes to warm up and then come out in April fighting, especially in Holland and Belgium. There's the complete makeup. They're still showing 8 riders up here. Maybe there are.
Well, we're still talking about an 8-man leading group at Testa de la Corsa. Starting to miss 1 or 2 turns now here, Phil. These riders starting to wonder whether or not they're going to survive, whether or not it's worth keeping the pacemaking going at the front end of the main field, because they know the time gaps are now starting to shrink.
Schuler moves off. Just looking at the record of Dan Lodeluca, he's never had a top 10 finish in Milan-San Remo. I find that amazing, really, because it's a typical race for him, and he's right there today, so we'll see. Now, yes, you're right. I think Turgo is the rider who put in that attack. He's now allowed the door to open. Schuler's having none of it. He's gone behind him and making him close it down again. So he's making him work, even though I think he's probably quite tired now.
Well, his body language was showing that he was under a lot of pressure, which is why it surprised me earlier, Phil, when he was the man to attack on the Capoberta. But having made an attack like that, he will not have earned any friends in this main group at the front end of the race, and they will have said to him, well, if you've got the ability to attack, you better keep working, my son.
Christophe Lemavelle there, number 114. Very relaxed on the handlebars. Now the drive is on here. Zacco Saboni continue to drive on. And using their big men to pace them and hopefully take Garzelli. He wears number 4 if you catch a glimpse of him, by the way. As we head closer and closer towards Monaco and France.
And watch out for the sprinter on their team as well, because Luca Paolini in the past has finished in the top 3 in Milano-San Remo. So if he can get his body over the Cipressa and the Poggio, you can't discount him getting himself into the top 10.
No, he's had his big moments as a sprinter. We've seen that in the Tour of Britain in Great Britain a couple of years ago. He was winning stages as and when he felt like it, but I'm not sure he's a sprinter of the class of this field, but we'll see.
Everybody getting very nervous now as they make their way through these idyllic little seaside resorts, which in the months of July and August are absolutely full of holiday makers. Not only, of course, from Italy and France, but also from the rest of Europe. People travelling down to this part of the world to enjoy their Mediterranean holiday. This is the first day of spring, and that is the first time we've gone inside of the 1 minute mark.
Yes, the beginning of the end now. 58 seconds, and it's all down to the pacemaking of Acqua Saponi, who really have altered it here. Whenever there's a slight easing of it, you see the peloton reforming, scurrying up to reclaim a position or two. Very shortly we're swinging up the hills again. This is back with the leaders. It looks like they've already swung onto it. Is it the Turquino they've gone onto here?
No, they're still looking to get a little bit further up the road to the start of the Cipressa. 31 kilometres to go, and it's usually once they come out of this town they make a right-hand turn, and that is the start of the Cipressa, the summit of which is around about 25 kilometres to go to the finish. And then that all remains after that, of course, is the very famous Poggio, where Eddie Merckx laid the foundations for 7 victories in Milano-San Remo.
Yeah, I meant the Cipressa when I said Turquino. In fact, it was rather a long while ago. Here come the men in red, working very, very well together as a team time trial here. Now everybody will be working out what they're trying to do. Liquigas are moving their men forward. Armstrong is staying right in the thick of it here as well. So they're all now packing for the climb. Life gets a bit rough at the front here, and also Cervelo are moving their men forward too, and that's an interesting move for them. They've got 2 very fast finishers on their squad in Heinrich Hausler and Thor Hushovd.
That rider who was on the right-hand side, in fact, was Henrik Hausler. Had a pretty good start to the season in the Amgen Tour of California. This is at the back end of the main field, but this gives you a little chance to see how fast we're going and the difference in pace between the 8-man leading group of riders, Phil, and the peloton behind. And that's always a little bit of a bad sign when you see that red car pulling out, because that's the car of the referee, and they normally pull out when the gap starts to come down inside of the 30-second margin.
Yes, they know they're coming now. The face is giving it all away. Their cool and collective appearance of an hour or so ago has gone now. These are moments of desperation hanging on. Mark Cavendish getting himself in the picture, so he's got himself in a good position. He looks well as well right now, and he's got the team as they continue now to revamp the situation at the front. The Lamprey rider there was Manuela Mori. Interesting now, and this is Weckmann in the middle in the champion of Germany's jersey. He's won it, defended it successfully last year, so he's had that jersey on for 2 years now. And Astana are moving their men. When we get a long camera shot like that, then the inevitable is about to happen.
Well, you mentioned earlier about Bernard Eisel, Phil, having been in that early morning breakaway. That was in fact Bernard Eisel who was on the front end of the main field for Team Columbia High Road, and he's obviously decided, having been in the early morning breakaway, he's going to sacrifice his chances now to make sure that he can get Mark Cavendish into the next town at the front end of the main field, and to help Cavendish start the front end of the main field on the Cipressa. Those are the leaders. 25 seconds is not very much at a stage like this.
This is Kristoff here, trying to just keep the pace up, but don't look over the shoulder. I think he might have been dropped, in fact. As he continues now, which is on the bottom of the hooks there. I think the days are numbered. They are coming very, very quickly now.
He's decided to actually
go away, hasn't he?
On his own there to try and jump off the front end of the main field, but the main group. But I have to say this is pretty much, I think, just prolonging the agony, because when the main field has got the bit between their teeth and they know that just around the corner is the climb of the Cipressa, they realise now that it's starting to pick up the main field in the pace. But Kristoff from AG2R is just getting himself a little bit of extra TV time here this afternoon.
Yes, it's a team he's been very loyal to, Kristoff. He's been with this team since he turned professional in 2002. He's only won 5 races, and he hasn't in fact won a race since he won the time trial championship of the Ukraine back in 2004. And he's not going to win Milan-San Remo either at the moment.
Well, Klostergaard has pulled him back into the fold, and he was covered very admirably there by his compatriot in the breakaway, the man from France. There you can see Turgot, who, although he looks like the weakest man in the breakaway, seems to be a very difficult man to get rid of. The peloton are completely and utterly packed together, because now they know, Phil, we've probably got about 2 kilometres to the right-hand turn and the start of the Cipressa. There's big Tom Bonin there on the front left-hand side of the main field, and he would be a man who would be looking to try and get himself a victory here at Milan-San Remo.
Such a complicated little road this. It's crammed right onto the edge of the ocean or the sea, and all of the villages here almost falling off the cliffside, and yet they still manage to close the roads to bring Milan-San Remo home, as these riders now are wiping them out one by one. That's Maxim Belkov, who's just come off to the right, so they're all picking them off now. These are the last survivors of 11 men today. Desperate moments, they're soon to be washed away. Still at it, Sebastian Turgot, and this is Kristoff. And the other man surviving for the moment is Klostergaard. But there is the whole field, and like a pack of Indians on the horizon there, as they now start to pick them off one by one.
Well, just 3 men remaining at the front end of the peloton. But when you see the peloton, as we just did a moment ago, fan out across the road, that's an indication, Phil, that they know they've got the race in hand. They know they can pull these 3 back at any time that they want to, because these men, I don't think, have got very much power left in the engine room. Here's a right-hand turn now as they come around the corner. They're now looking for the sharp right-hand bend, and it's not very much more than 300 or 400 metres, and that will be the start of the Cipressa. Here it is.
Yes, it's always horrible. If you turn right, if you don't want to go over the climb, you can abandon the race and go straight on. It's not unknown for a lot of riders to do that if the chances are done for. And again, it is Turgot who is first onto the climb. I wonder if he's going to try something else. He's certainly a racer, this boy. Klostergaard in second place, Kristoff, the 3 survivors now.
Well, the advantage is not very much more than about 20 seconds as they keep looking over their shoulders. Well, that's not 20 seconds anymore at all. It's 4 or 5. It's all over for these 3 men.
Now, what's going to happen now? Immediately these boys are caught. Someone will jump from the front of that peloton. This is where the race will start now, to try and eliminate many of the sprinters before we get down to the finish.
Well, I see Turgot has gone backwards very rapidly indeed. These 2 are just hovering off the front end of the main field, but the main field now, I think, Phil, will keep the pace nice and high. In fact, it's FDJ, Français des Jeux, who are at the front end of the peloton, keeping the control nice and fast.
Well, after all the work done by Acros Saponi, I think there is only, in fact, Stefano Garzelli still left at the front. And there he is, number 4. So his team have now done their bit, got him in the right position, and left him there now to see what he could do for himself.
Just looking down there, you can see all the leaders. There's Pippo Pozzato, by the way, moving up there. 91 is David Rebellin.
Paolini's number 8, and he is in a very good position here for a sprinter to keep an eye on things.
213 is Mark Cavendish there. Now he started well at the front end of the main field.
He's going to feel pretty pleased with himself riding so strongly at the front at this stage of Milan-San Remo.
Big pressure coming from Française de Jeux. Now I don't think they should be using this amount of force now. They should be leaving up to one of the stronger teams to set the pace making. These are the early slopes of the Cipressa. It's one of those nasty climbs that, although it's very difficult to begin with, it seems to get steeper up towards the top. There's Tom Bonan on the inside, looking very powerful too, Phil, at the front end of the pack.
Yes, well, it doesn't seem to have done too much damage, the Cipressa, today, because the sprinters are holding position right up there. Hushoft is there, Houselet is there as well. A little bit of a scurry on the far side to reposition Tom. But this is looking good for the sprinters right now. It hasn't eliminated anybody at all there. This is life at the back as they try to hang on a little bit towards the finish. That was Christian Fumagalli. He's on the wildcard team here, Ceramica Flaminia.
You can see the nervousness now. Everybody's scuttling up through the left and the right hand side to get themselves well placed at the front end of the main field. Number 21, Lance Armstrong, riding his brand new Trek machine. Had a little bit of trouble in the Amgen Tour of California when his time trial bike disappeared from the hotel one evening, and he was very fortunate to get it back.
Well, that looked like an attack by David Rebellin, and it is. He's just got up to the front of the race here. Garzelli's got his back wheel. Oh, they're saying it's Michele Scarponi. I thought it is. Yes, it is. Now we're seeing closer up. We've got Garzelli taking second wheel. And now this is where the tempo's really been lifted now. These boys are pedalling very quickly and probably sitting in the saddle at high revs too. This will hurt. This might split the field.
Well, this is the first of many attacks that are likely to come to try and create the first selection at the front end of the main field, because a lot of these riders feel, they want to get rid of the sprinters and they know this is their first chance. Moving a little bit further forward there, you can see Team Saxo Banco very happily represented at the front by Andy Schleck. He's a man I'm expecting big things of. There's the first crack.
Well, Scarponi comes to this race, victory in Terreno Adriatico. Now we'll see what he can turn out here.
That's Fabian Wegman making the effort to come across the gap. There's David Rebellin there, and he's right onto the wheel of Wegman, and he's going to wait to see whether or not this is an ideal moment for the counter move. It's Scarponi on the front who's set the first little bit of action at on the main field, but it's once they slow down that you're absolutely certain to see another move coming straight over the top, and they haven't yet actually cracked the main field.
It's a long line, that ball now. It's a very long line. Scarponi, remember, coming back from the suspension last August for alleged involvement in the Operation Puerto. And the Italians took him out. Something he's denied, of course, but now he's back in the sport and he's looking to find his legs. He's certainly got off to a great start this year. And he's doing a lot of pacemaking here, and typically it will be for David Rebellin, I would think. His teammate, he's very grateful, Scarponi, to the Sedimenti boys for taking him on board. He couldn't find a sponsor in Italy, but there he is now, looking very strong indeed. This is a ripper up here right now, and if we could just pan a camera down the back, I think we'd see the peloton is splitting.
Well, that's Andy Schleck going through there, just on the wheel of Pippo Pozzato. Looking a bit further back down, we get a chance to see which riders are riding well here. This is the back end of the main field, and this, Phil, is the damage of the Cipressa. Yeah. This team, I'm not surprised to see slipping off the back end of the peloton, because they did a lot of work before we got to the Cipressa for the team leaders, like, of course, Stefano Garzelli and Luca Paolini, who's still fairly well paced at the front end of the main field.
Yeah, that was Codol who was off there, but there's three Accra boys went now. There's Weckman setting the pace too. And Scarponi still driving here at the front to try and crack this field. I think they've done quite a bit of damage here. Now, have we got all the sprinters we had earlier on at the start of the club? A lot of daylight between those riders, but if they can hang on, they kick over the top, they will regroup on the way down.
It looks like Thor Hushoft is riding at the front end of the main pack. This is the damage that can be caused by the Cipressa. That's why there's a lot of teams at the front really hammering away there to try and create this damage, to try and create the first serious selection before the final selection, which will come on the slopes of the Poggio. And it is still Scarponi followed by Garzelli at the Testa della Corsa, the front end of the bike race.
Yes, and Scarponi has set the pace since they picked up the breakaways here with a tremendous turn of speed. His enthusiasm going all before him now, and as we pan down the group here, I don't see any signs of number 21 anymore, Lance Armstrong either. I think he's been forced out of the back just a little bit.
Well, I'm not surprising. I did just notice Julian Dean going through there, Phil, and he's the man from New Zealand and from Garmin Slipstream who, if it comes down to a sprint towards the end, has got himself a very good chance of finishing in the top 10. I think Lance Armstrong in the early races like this will be missing a little bit of top-end speed. That looks like Tom Bonan trying to get himself just onto the back wheel of the rider in front of him. He knows this for him is a question of survival, and he can start to see the gaps appearing. That's when the sprinters start to panic a fraction. They know they cannot afford to lose more than 20 to 30 seconds at this point of the Cipressa, because that 20 to 30 seconds, they can easily peg it back on the descent of the Cipressa with the one or two nasty technical corners that there are taking us back down to the Mediterranean.
Well, just look at the face there on Stefano Garzelli. That man really suffering here, but the top pro he is. He knows if he can hang on here, something might come from it. And he's riding a very good second wheel just now. There's the tail of the peloton, I think. That's Bonan. I think he just went bang, bang, and out the back of that, he just suddenly got... There's Lance Armstrong. So I think we're looking at possibly the second group on the road here as they try to stay in touch. They may not even know there's a split in the middle because, of course, with all the hairpin bends, they can't actually work it out.
Well, just having a look at Lance Armstrong here, Phil, in a great one-day classic like Milano-San Remo, I've got to say those legs are going around rather smoothly for a 37-year-old.
Oh, it's tremendous to be able to come back at this level straight away and hold your own, because that's what he's doing right now. In the Tour Down Under, he never missed a move of any importance. He really didn't get a top podium finish because of the small win bonuses, but he was always there. And if any breakaway looked like working, he was part of it. Just didn't work out. Now the drive continues here. This looks like we've got Danilo De Luca's LPR boys driving on a little bit right now.
This is the mayhem at the back end of the main field at 21 kilometres to go to the finish, and that's about 10 kilometres, Phil, to the start of the Poggio. That was Lance Armstrong's group, but this is the front end of the main field now where things are starting to once again just get that little bit more organised.
Well, there's still plenty of guys want to try and throw the back into this race if they can. Plenty of riders who want to try and open up this gap. It looks like we might have a... Oh, there's the gap that we're talking about, and there's still one or two trying to race across the gap. Now Armstrong and the others are in the second split here. That was, and Scarponi is the boy that caused this, but now he's got a little bit of help coming his way.
Well, the help here is coming from Ivan Basso, and he's obviously thinking about his teammates. Maybe a Nibali performance by him on the final climb of the day. Scarponi is still up at the front end of the main field. He's in second or third place. We are pretty much over the top of the Col de la Cipressa now, 275 kilometres covered on the day. And it's on the one or two little corners here that if anybody's got anything left, they've got a chance of nailing back the gap. That's the start of the descent.
That is quite a nice little split going there, and what a big feather in the cap of Ivan Basso going over the top of the Cipressa there, seemingly in first place.
72 at the back there, that's Jeremy Hunter. He's obviously done his work for his teammates, Thor Hushovd and Heinrich Hausler. Well, I can't see the riders from Cervelo Test Team in that leading split of riders there, Phil, which now it was looking as if it was going to be about 20, but by the time they get to the bottom of the Cipressa, I think we'll be up to 50 men.
Yeah, I reckon that's so, and I think there's some of the sprinters, at least, including Tom Bonan, are coming back on that split there. They missed out on the front split, but they knew they could get back on the descent. Liquigas leading the charge away from the Cipressa, heading for the Poggio now. And far from any decisions making yet, except we've eliminated probably half the field on that climb, maybe a little bit more at the moment. But it's definitely going to be a grouping of some 50 riders here. It's a very difficult race for our cameras to get in amongst it. That's the only problem. Look at that, 6¼ hours so far. You can add on another 20 minutes or so. But it's because of these narrow roads and they're so close to the sea, it's very difficult for the cameras to get in and show us the faces of the boys.
Very technical, narrow roads that the race organisation it takes to try and split the race up on the running towards the finish. As I said earlier, this race, this climb, the Cipressa, was only introduced into Milan-San Remo in the 1980s. We're now inside of 20 kilometres to go. That's 12 miles of racing, and I have to think that Daniele Bernati, Phil, is in the group because of the way that Team Liquigas are riding at the front end of this main field.
Steady as you go, just clipping the ends off the corners. Good descending here on very, very good road surfaces at the moment. As we now head through the famous greenhouses of this part of Italy, all the market gardens that abound here, and the Italians, not surprisingly, are starting to get pretty excited now. Garzelli used his team well, he's lost them all now, but he's right there on the front of the peloton, and Luca Paolini, I think, the sprinter, is also here for Acqua Saponi.
Well, every now and again you can see one or two riders just starting to get themselves back onto the group which is forming. This is how it happens. You take a few risks in the corners, try not to use your brakes, and you can slice 5, 6, 10 seconds off on a couple of corners like this and pull yourself back into the race. But you have to take the risks, because now we're not looking at very much more than 20 minutes towards the end of this great first big classic of the season.
Well, thank heavens it's not raining today, because these corners would have been absolutely treacherous. Seen so many riders fall on the wet descents, but today weather conditions are perfect. The sun is out. It's a reminder that this is spring, but summer's not far around the corner here in Europe now. And these boys are really just beginning their big season with this race. Then it's all over for the spring classics in Belgium, France and Holland. And then the first big tours will commence with the Romandy race, and of course onwards to the Giro d'Italia. Same organisation, by the way, as Milan-San Remo. But just that they drive off the suppressor back onto the coast road again. As I say, if you'd abandoned the race, you could have come straight down the road. This is Nibali now, has got himself on the front and he's riding, looking to see what the combination is. Always very important now, they're checking to see who are the strong men, who's made the split, who's thinking of winning. 113 is here for Team Columbia High Road.
Well, I'll tell you what, Phil, that looked like it was going to be a small group of riders, but I've got myself with my counting hat on here, and I reckon we could be between 50 and 70 riders. That's big Tor Hushoff down there for Team Cervelo Test Team.
Yeah, but Cavendish has come over.
Oh, there's a crash there.
Yep.
Somebody's gone down. These are very dangerous technical descents here. It looks as if that rider from Euskaltel went down very hard into the wall at the side of the road.
Yeah, you see, it has fell rather heavily there. As I was about to say, that Cavendish must be feeling pretty happy with himself, getting up into the leading group, along with Hushoff, certainly. And that looks rather a nasty fall. It's an Euskaltel Grady rider who's gone down.
Ivan Basso now deciding to whip up the pace-making. I'm certain the way these men are riding, Phil, that of course their man Bernati must be there. There's Heinrich Hausler going through. Tor Hushoff a little bit further back, trying to look into the face of these riders. I just noticed Julian Dean there for Garmin Slipstream. Watch out for Julian, because he's a very experienced professional bike rider. 166 Pelizzotti is in the group as well. 162 is Daniel Bernati. There he is.
Just alongside Cavendish. Cavendish and Hincapie are together. So that looks like Hincapie, if they survive, will be the lead-out man for Cavendish today.
Well, he's going to have to get him, first of all, let's not forget, over the slopes of the climb of the Poggio. A lot of talking and discussing going on here, not too much organisation. I would have to say currently, Phil, this is really very much a question of survival and hanging into the group.
Juan Antonio Fletcher, often a man of the early classics, is in this group as well for Rabobank. Look at this now. This is Basso again, looking over his face. He's really enjoying being back in the peloton as he continues to push on. Ismail Eviti is in there, the leader of the Case Depart team as well, and the gap is 40 seconds. Now, that's between the two big bunches right now.
That's 40 seconds back to the Lance Armstrong group, I would hazard a guess there. But Basso and the rest of the men from Liquigas have decided today this is an ideal situation from them. They've eliminated a lot of bike riders. It looks like Alan Davis in there as well, with Big Tom Boonen right behind him.
Well, Basso's got his own little agenda here. He's working very, very hard. He's got Nibali on his wheel as the riders are coming up all of the time. You're right, that is very much Alan Davis. He's the lead-out man for Tom Boonen, so he must be on his back wheel. We know that Cavendish is here with Hincapie. We've seen Hushoff. We've seen Heinrich Hausler. So some of the sprinters are going to treat us to a grand finish if they get over the top of the Poggio.
Well, the dark jersey there on the left-hand side at the front end of the main field with the red square on its back, that's Oscar Pereira, and right behind him is Luis Leon Sanchez. Now, he's a man who started this season off with fairly fine form. Now, watch out for a late-minute attack from him. That's Sanchez, just the third rider back in the Case d'Epargne line.
This is Scarponi again. He was the man that did the damage. Oh, steady on Alan. I thought he was going down then. He just rolled into that Case de Pan rider. All is well. Just Garzelli is number 4. He's dropped back a little bit off the pace just for the moment, but he's quite happy with the situation the way it is. He will plan an attack, I feel sure, on the Poggio. He can't take it to the sprint. 213 rather is Mark Cavendish down there, sitting behind George Hincapie now. It wouldn't surprise me, Paul, if Hincapie hasn't steered him through the traffic to put him in this position.
Well, I noticed the other man up there for Team Quickstep is the new signing on that squad, the Frenchman Sylvain Chavanel. Now, I haven't seen Tom Bonan riding to the front end of the main field, but the fact that Alan Davis and Chavanel are riding together would be an indication that Bonan must be somewhere in that pack looking to try and get himself the victory. There is Pippo Pozzato in the white jersey, the jersey of Team Katusha.
Well, this is interesting now. Case de Pan bringing all the men to the front. They haven't got a real recognised sprint finisher on the squad, in all honesty.
Well, their tactic, Phil, I would have to say, would be to try and launch somebody away on the Poggio, and I think the man that would be Luis Leon Sanchez, because he's got great form at the start of the season. Little organisation now starting to come for Team Cervelo Test Team. The third rider in that line there was the big god of thunder himself. He's riding not far away from Heinrich Hausler.
And just tucking into our picture there is Johan van Summeren, the workhorse of Silence Lotto, 205. As the riders of Armstrong's team come by, that was Popovic who's made the decision and made this group, and he was with Lance at the start of the climb, but he's obviously left him there. He's up there, Yaroslav Popovic.
Also in there as well was Maxim Iglinski and of course Bazayev, the Kazakhstan national champion. Big organisation coming. We're now looking at 4.5 kilometres to go to the start of the Poggio. Team Case de Pan showing why they're one of the top teams in the world here, and I would have to say the only reason, as you mentioned earlier, Phil, they don't have a sprinter on their squad. The only reason they can be doing this for is to try and launch a surprise attack on the Poggio itself.
Well, from there it looks as though it might have thinned down that bunch just a little bit more as well, but the Case de Pan boys are really dragging them out here as they get down the closed roads here in Arma. Silence Lotto, that looks like Van Summeren is moving the troops forward there. He's got 3 of them as they move up towards the front of the race. 1:15, so they're pulling away now from what we will call the Armstrong bunch. I think he's in the second bunch. 1:15, that should be enough as they hit the Poggio with that sort of a gap. It's just a rush down to San Remo after this.
Well, that is the Poggio you may well have just seen on the horizon. Once they come out of this tunnel, they've got around about 3.5 kilometres to go to the start of that climb, and this is the time when anybody who is a team helper on the front of this group now has to sacrifice themselves for the team sprinters.
Vasily Kirienka, the Case de Pan, is setting the pace here. It is short and certainly not sweet, the Poggio. And it's the last chance for at least 3/4 of this peloton, if they take the sprinters, the quality that we have, down to the finishing line, and expect a battle to the line to be between Tom Bonan, Mark Cavendish, Hausler perhaps, and Hushoft. Maybe 1 or 2 others we haven't spotted in this group as well.
There's a serious amount of work being done there by Team Case de Pan. They are all over the front of this main field, but there's a lot of passengers in there too. Men who are thinking of trying to get themselves over the top of the Poggio. I noticed once again the number 8. That's Luca Paolini, the big black jersey there of Cervelo Test Team. That's Big Tor Hushoft. He's a man who's had himself a stage victory in the Amgen Tour of California so far this season, and he'll be looking to try and create their big victory here at the end of the day in Milan-San Remo if he can. Alan Davis, 182.
Yeah, and he's always very close to Tom Bonan, so they're organised just now and they're letting him get on with it. This is Luca Paolini, could spoil the act as well. An Italian sprinter in Italy is worth 2 men as they continue to just shuttle through a little bit. Just seen Petropoli go through too. He has his moments on the LPR squad.
Oh, this is a
nasty split, that.
Very nasty split as they go around that traffic circle there. You've got to be very alert. It is a dangerous bike race. We're at the Testa della Corsa now. That was Yaroslav Popovic making the acceleration there. Probably trying to get to Bazayev up to the front end of the main field, because looming now, getting closer with every pedal stroke, is the start of the Poggio climb.
Yes, you get that feeling, don't you now? You can almost feel the tension down there. as everybody tried to hold lead position before they go on to the Poggio itself. It's going to be a tough one, this. There's Garzelli. He's been in that pain ever since he started working at the front, but he's still there, and he's still looking very useful. I reckon he's going to go on the Poggio.
He's looking, but if anybody reacts to it, it's going to be, I think, Juan Antonio Fletcher, because the man from the orange jerseyed squad of Rabobank, is never far away from the front end of the main field either. The dark blue, the pale blue jersey there is Bazayev wearing number 22. He's the national champion of Kazakhstan. The black jersey, Henrik Hausler. The big names now, Phil, are starting to come to the front. It really is extremely nervous. And yes, that group, it really has thinned out a bit over the last couple of kilometres. Inside of 10 kilometres to go, probably only 1 kilometre to the right-hand bend and the start of the Poggio.
Oh, these are desperate moments. The movement there is terrific now. Riders trying desperately, and it's FDJ, Français de Jeu, who snatch the front as they get onto the Poggio. And they are really winding this one up now. And this is how they always come to the Poggio. And it's a question of, have they got the speed? And can the sprinters hang on?
Salita del Poggio, the climb of the Poggio. I noticed Alan Davis was around that corner there in third place. Right behind him was Sylvain Chavanel, looking a bit further down the line there to see the big hulk of Tom Bonan. He's not in the first 10 or 15 places, but he'll have to make sure that he stays in contact. This is Chavanel. He's going to be a good signing, I think, for Team Quickstep this year, and one of the reasons he came across to Quickstep away from Cofidis was he said he wanted to be on a strong team for the one-day classics.
Well, he's riding this brilliantly, and I think he's riding for Bonan today, that's for sure, because he's trying to keep the pace steady and stop the surges that would destroy Tom Bonan. Now, we've lost sight of him at the moment. We're trying to find the sprinters down here as our camera's dropping down a little bit. But there's Scarponi again. Now, this is George Hincapie. Well, where is Mark Cavendish? Because I don't see Mark at the moment.
Well, I don't know what happened to George Hincapie there, but he had to flick around somebody. There's Julian Dean, number 131. I also noticed that Rebellin was very present at the front end of the main field. 91 there. You can see just moving up down the outside, that is David Rebellin. Making sure now he's the kind of rider who would put in a late minute attack. If you can jump over the top of this climb with a 15 or 20 second advantage, you've got a very good chance of surviving on the daredevil descent down into the outskirts of San Remo. There's your man that you've been looking for, Mark Cavendish. He's still in contact with this group.
He's not held the wheel of George, but he certainly has held the wheel of some others in that group. And the pacemaking here is control pacemaking, because he's trying to keep this race, Chavanel, together for Tom Bonan, and he's done a darn good job here, because nobody has launched an attack. I'm surprised. Maybe Garzelli was hurting just a bit too much, because he never came off the front.
Well, the place to launch the attack is once you get up to the final kilometre near the summit, and that's the best point to accelerate and try and get the gap on the front end of the main field. But for the moment, I think it's just a little bit too fast for anybody to try and open up a gap, and that's because of the work that's being done by Team Quickstep and, of course, Sylvain Chavanel. This is the back end of the group. Just goes to show you how fast these guys go around these corners. I just don't want to remind you, by the way, Phil, they are actually still going uphill.
They most certainly are, and I must say, our camera, by taking the chance to slip up the outside of the riders, they hug the right, Paolini in the middle there. You know, George Hincapie, if he loses Cavendish loses his wheel, and Hincapie's free to fight for himself here, and he has a very good reputation in Milan-San Remo. He's twice finished 9th. He's been in at the kill. And there's no doubt now he's going to be in at the kill again. So who knows for the big American. As they come up towards the top, the pressure is still on though. And it's still Chavanel doing the work. As the camera pulls back, Bonan's not near the front.
He's not, but his teammates are all over the front. 221 is Pippo Pozzato there, looking very dangerous as well. Number 8, Luca Paolini. All the big names are still keeping themselves in contact at the front end of the main field. But in fact, Phil, we're talking a lot about Tom Bonan. He's not actually in the first 15 to 20 riders there, so he is obviously going through all kinds of hell just to stay in contact with this group. Alan Davis, on the other hand, in second place there, looks very good. He could be the spare sprinter this afternoon for Team Quickstep.
He's had a podium before, Alan Davis. He's happy to be on this team now. He joined the midterm last year, was grateful for that.
This is Barredo now, who's decided to come from the front for Team Quickstep. So obviously Quickstep, I think, have confidence in Tom Bonen here this afternoon. They know if they keep it nice and high like this, they will not have any attacks up towards the top of this climb, and that's the best way to nullify attacks, just asphyxiate everybody.
Well, Bonen's number is 181. If you spot him down there, I haven't seen him at the moment at all. Number 4 there is Garzelli. He's just come off the pace a little bit. It's been too fast for him this climb. Well, having said that,
there's the move.
Wheel through. That's Rebellin going.
That was the move I expected from David Rebellin, inside a kilometre to go to the summit. But you know what? If you look at the reaction there, Phil, I think everybody else was expecting that move, including Garzelli.
Somebody. Nibali's jumped on the back end of the message too. It might cause a little split, but I think he's left it too late here, David Rebellin. As good as he is, Olympic medalist. And again, Garzelli just sticks there. His face is a mask of pain, but he chases everything. Look at this.
Well, that was the right place to make the move there. Now, this is the counter move, which might go at inside 7Ks to go. This is Pippo Pozzato, but he too has still not managed to crack the gap on everybody else. They're going to throw caution to the wind there, because these are the riders now, Phil, who do not want to wait for a sprint. These are the riders who want to leap clear.
Well, they're throwing everything at the finish here. Pozzato at last forced a little bit of a gap here. Garzelli's willing to go through and has done a bit of work. There's somebody in there, I think, for Euskaltel Euskadi as well. This is Benucci, who's just got to the front, I think. No, it's not. It's Florencio. No, it's not. It is Benucci, because it is an LPR rider who's gone through. But just looking over his shoulder, that is a long line, and it's holding. It is not cracking, so it doesn't look too good for the escapers here.
First corner over the top of the Poggio. Now that looked as if it was Pippo Pozzato went around there, but you know, there is not much of a gap, and the only way to go ahead now is to really take the risks. Hincapie nicely placed there at the front 12th or 15th place, and halfway down the group there, just sitting not far from the back of that group was Tom Bonen, so he's going to have to struggle to get himself to the front end of the main field. This is the move on the descent. It's Pozzato in the white jersey of Team Katusha.
This is a very fast, twisting descent. It's caught many people out over the years, not least Paul Sherwin's friend, Alan Bondu, who looks set to have won it a few years back now, Paul, but he fell, didn't he, and Gomez went on to win.
He decked it in the first corner right up at the top there. Now these 3 riders have got themselves a nice little advantage there. Coming across the gap, this is one of the riders from AG2R looking back to see, and you see this is when the chances of opening up the advantage. It's Garzelli going round there next. This is a very dangerous and technical descent. You can be absolutely certain that every bike rider there is pushing himself to the absolute limit to get around that corner as quickly as possible and stay in contact for a possible victory.
That's Martin Elmiger, I think, who's just hooked up. And it's just the typical Elminger move, this, for the Swiss rider. He's the 4th man in that little group of 4 riders for AG2R. But they've gone nowhere. The whole field is closing down. There's a flat running, don't forget, towards the finish. So this is not a winning split anymore. And it's still going to go to the sprinters at the moment.
Scrambling inside of 5 kilometres to go now, and it has come back together, as the Italians will say on race radio, Gruppo Compacto. But not for long, because Liquigas now launches one more attack. They want to keep the pace nice and high, and that'll be for their man Daniele Bernati, who is definitely in this group this afternoon.
2 Liquigas boys trying to conclude the affairs at the front here. It wouldn't surprise me that's not Nibali himself having a little go. Boy, they really do just rub against that wall as they brake hard and swing left. They've got to take chances, but more importantly at this stage, you've got to hold position. Because once we run onto the flat roads, then it's every man for himself down to the finishing line. Again, sharp braking. There's the switchbacks. There's only 2 riders left here for Aqua Saponi. There's the one there, number 4, which is Garzelli.
It's Hincapie there, looking over his shoulders. Now I know what he's doing. He's looking to see what the position is of Mark Cavendish. Hincapie's a man who's got an incredible amount of experience and still got an incredible amount of enthusiasm. He's only about 6 or 7 places in front of Mark Cavendish, and that's why I think Hincapie was looking over his shoulders, because as they get off the bottom of the Poggio, there's only about 2 kilometres to go to the finish line, and it doesn't leave you very much time to get yourselves organised for the sprint.
A little bit of a split still on here. It's Benucci sitting at the back. I know it's his teammate now. In fact, this is Gabriele Busiccio, who's just tagged on. It was Bonucci up the climb, but Sissio's gone down the climb. There's some idea of the speed as they're leaning to this corner here.
Looks like Nibali, who's gone around the corner again, looking over his shoulder. What he's looking for is to see where is Daniele Bernati. Keep the pace nice and high, and that prevents any of the other riders from moving up and starting to cause a little bit of confusion with your rider. I think, in fact, that was Bernati, Phil, in about 5th or 6th position.
Well, they're still thinking about it here. It's almost the domestiques, and the rather classy domestiques, I must say, who are setting the pace here. Nibali quite clearly has decided to make the pace for his team sprinters. Well, it's all eyes out towards the finish now, Paul, because tactics will play a hand, but it looks to me as though Cavendish here has recovered well on that way down, and he's started to move through the bunch.
Well, it's still at 2.8 kilometres to go to the finish. Liquigas all over the front end of this main field, Phil, and I think the reason for that is they reckon that their man Daniele Bernati is going to come up with a win this afternoon. There's George Hincapie. Actually, just look at that. Hincapie's moved Cavendish over on the right-hand side. What an incredible amount of tactical nous George Hincapie has got. A few moments ago, Cavendish was at the back end of this group, and there he is very comfortably in 4th or 5th position. Alan Davis over there on the left-hand side. Now you can start to see the little bit of organisation for Cervelo test team. Thor Hushoff lost the wheel there of his man Heinrich Hausler, who's up into 4th.
Yes, still a little argy-bargy going on too with Lloyd Mondery there of France, because that was the rider that Hushoff collided with. But they're all trying to hold front wheels now and plan their own little strategy for the finish here. That's an attack going by. It's cased upon. It looks like it's Luis Sanchez who's made a move.
Good move by him. He's got himself about 2 metres 50 off the front end of the main field. We saw him win stages in the Tour de France last year, and he realises this is a great chance for him to try and get the victory for Spain, but they're all over him and they're clawing it back together very slowly but carefully.
Yes, it's Bonucci who's pegged him back there, and there's Weckman is there as well as Hausler.
Hausler looking over his shoulders, Phil, looking to see where is Thor Hushoff to these two riders. Let's not forget this is a brand new team, and they're still maybe trying to work themselves out on the running down towards the finish. 1.5 kilometres to go. They're now very shortly going to swing into the Via Roma, the road of Rome.
I'm just looking here now. It looks to me as though Cervelo have got themselves in a big position here. Although George Hincapie did get Cavendish back into play, he's lying back a long way down this peloton at the moment as the LPR boys are beginning to amass attack as they start to move. Weckman himself has now got himself boxed in 3rd wheel.
Well, LPR have got a big organisation coming to the front end of this group now. They're inside the Ultimo Kilometro, and in fact Hincapie has moved back up to the front there over on the right hand side, but he's lost Cavendish. There's Cavendish, number 1, 213. He's got himself caught up in the melee of riders a little bit further back, and he's not on the wheel of his lead-out man, Hincapie.
Well, that was a big effort there. I think it was De Luca who's doing. He's trying to put Pataki into a position to win. Pataki's got 3rd wheel around the corner. Well, he'd be the logical man to win at the moment as they start to look at this by George Hincapie now. He's got the 1st wheel. He's not leading out Cavendish now. Cavendish has chosen to go somewhere else, but this is a superb effort by the big American, and Cavendish is not too far away.
Well, there you can see Alan Davis comfortably in 2nd position. There's the move now. This is the lead out for Thor Hushoff on the right, and that's Hausler.
Well, the way Hausler's gone, I don't think Hushoff has got the speed to take his wheel. Cavendish has had to go early here, and this is a real dice around the road. But to Hausler, he really is a German, but he's well known in Inverell in Australia, and Cavendish gets him on the line. Well, I can't believe he got him there, Paul. I thought Hausler had that, but he's got him on the line, and if he has won it, then that's the first British win since Tom Simpson. I think we go back 45 years.
Well, I'd like to see just how close that was, because in fact that was the lunge to the line. That was a real trackman's move by Mark Cavendish there, but it would have to be extremely close. I have to say I don't really know what went wrong with Cervelo test team there. I think Heinrich Hausler all of a sudden saw that he got himself the gap and he decided to go, but you can see Mark Cavendish there, Phil, I think is pretty much convinced that he's got himself the win, and there's Hincapie.
Well, that is a huge result, yes, and George Hincapie looked for him over those last miles today, looked after him as best he could, led him out, well, didn't quite lead him out, but led the race to the line. I have to say that is an incredible result, not just for Mark Cavendish but also for the British as well, because that was a very special ride. There's the attack that came from Heinrich Hausler, who gets as many cheers in Australia as he does in his home country of Germany these days. All his folks live in Inverell in New South Wales. But look at the chase here. And Cavendish had to come from an awful long way back. And I really didn't think he was going to make that.
Well, I'll tell you what, this man is a great track sprinter, former world champion, and it's that lunge for the line.
That was
it's very close indeed, but you know, as a track man, as a great sprinter, as soon as he hit the line, Cavendish there, Phil, knew that he'd got it. This was a real cat and mouse run up to the finish line. Hausler went a long way out. I think he probably thought that he had Thor Hushovd on his wheel, and I don't think he expected to try and go for a sprint from that far out.
Well, if that's the standard of sprinting, 2009 is going to be a special season. Cavendish, who had such a wonderful year last year. Don't forget, he's already won 2 stages of the Tour de California this year, 2 stages of the Tour de Guitar. He's alongside his mentor here, 4 times winner, Erik Zabel, who's going to feel pretty happy, almost as happy as when he was winning Milan-San Remo himself.
Well, Erik Zabel has been brought on to Team Columbia High Road to teach Mark Cavendish about these races, about the sprints, about all of the different ways that a sprint can unfold. But I bet he never guessed that one was going to happen here this afternoon. But Hincapie put this young man into the right place at the right time. There's a former great himself on the left-hand side, Mario Cipollini. What a great win there by Mark Cavendish. And as you mentioned, it's been a long time since we've had a great British win in a classic like that.
Yes, well, the heydays. We've had a third with Brian Robinson, a win for Tommy Simpson. But there's the result. It's now a win from the man from the Isle of Man, Mark Cavendish, getting a victory for Team Columbia High Road. So it's the Americans on top as well.
Good. They kept me in good position on the climbs, and on the climbs I just felt better. And I was there at the finish, and George helped me at the finish.
George Hincapie mi ha aiutato, tutta la squadra è stata con me sulle salite.
He put me in the best position in the last 500 meters, and then we've surprised with Hausler going, and then it was just a case of using his slipstream to get past him. And
Ha detto che lui aveva paura per un momento quando ha rivisto arrivare Hausler, non sapeva se riusciva a passarlo.
I was lucky I got him on the line, and yeah, and I won. So
Are you happy?
I'm really happy, like unbelievable.
Thank you very much. Io sono felicissimo.
Are you happy? I reckon he is. I mean, he's the winner of Milan-San Remo, one of the greatest classics in the world of cycling, and he won't be 22, Paul, until April.
Well, I tell you what, climbing up onto the top step of the podium, this young man, as you mentioned, Phil, is extremely young. It seems as if he's been around forever, and the way he rides with such incredible confidence. But he's never slow to compliment his team, and he always is the first one at the end of any victory that he gets to say, I couldn't have done this without my team.
That's right. In fact, he's 23 right now, so he's 24 in early into the new year. But there's Mark Cavendish now with the British flag, very proud indeed. But this is an American victory as well. Columbia High Road with the top new team on the block last year. Looks like they're heading that way again this year. But the new team is Cervelo, and they're off to a great start as well. Heinrich Hausler shaking hands with Mark Cavendish, and just waiting for the third place finisher to come on, and it's going to be a Cervelo sandwich because Thor Hushovd has taken that third place finish.
May well be a Cervelo sandwich, but the icing on the cake there goes to Mark Cavendish.
Yeah.
And great teamwork by Team Columbia High Road, and I think we'll see an awful lot more of that young man this year. I think we'll also see an awful lot more of Heinrich Hausler as well, Phil, because that was a pretty impressive performance there. I think he came out of the pack just a little bit too fast for his teammate Thor Hushovd to follow him.
Well, we're getting ready, I think, for the British anthem. We go back to 1964 when the last time that would have been played here for the victory by Tom Simpson. There's Eddie Merckx there, 7 times a winner, and I think he's recognising now that Mark Cavendish probably is the fastest sprinter on the current circuit. There's the result, 6 hours 42. Yes, the tears of joy there from Mark Cavendish. I make that, Paul, his 38th win since he turned professional back in 2007.
Well, it's certainly a very emotional moment for this man from the Isle of Man, but I think he's laying down the foundations now for what is going to be An incredible career for this young man, who I think has got to be probably the best sprinter ever to come out of the United Kingdom.
E un grande applauso per il vincitore della 100ª Milan-San Remo.
Well, they're all straightening their colours there. Nearly 7 hours in the saddle today. The 2009 season has begun. It's begun in the most unusual way. Victory for Columbia Team High Road, but victory for a British cyclist, Mark Cavendish, beating a man really who's an Australian but now gone back to his roots in Germany, Heinrich Hausler, and the God of Thunder finishing there in third place. It all's well for the rest of the season, that's for sure, because after now that Milan-San Remo is behind us, we'll all be off to Belgium for the big races. We'll be there. We hope you will be with us along the road. Until the next time, from Paul Sherwen, I'm Phil Liggett saying we'll see you shortly. Goodbye.